let's talk about Halifax. So Halifax has become the latest high street bank to go woke. It's a sentence I never thought I'd have to say, but the big Twitter storm this week. So they put out a tweet announcing this kind of new initiative, this new campaign around allowing people who work in their high street branches to wear name tags that also have their preferred pronouns on them. They said they wanted to open a conversation about gender identity, but as soon as a few of their customers complained in the threads and on social media and whatever, they promptly closed that discussion down and urged people, in fact, to close their accounts if they weren't on board with this wonderfully diverse moment. They're not the only ones. NatWest, I believe, have already ushered in these kinds of badges. Other kind of high street bands like M&S, etc., have been doing it for a long time. There's been stories about the Home Office, even, various kind of wings of the US military, stories of kind of, preferred pronouns being ushered in. Ella, what do you make of all of this? Because I suppose the other side is saying, why are you getting so upset about this particular issue? But there's surely a kind of coercive impact of demanding people follow along with this form of gender ideology, if you like.
It's also just intensely annoying. It's like, when you see like the kind of signs on doors and roads that are really obvious, like a slight bump here or something. It's like, if you're looking at someone called Barry Collins, who's 72 and is a bank clerk with, short grey hair and a tie, I think you probably, it wouldn't take a sort of someone with PhD in biology to ascertain that he's a man and that he probably would like it if you use he, him pronouns. Who even thinks about pronouns? I mean, it's really not a thing that anyone, it's just part of what you learn as a kid. But you're right, there is this sort of, there is this slightly darker side to it. I mean, these things are always announced on Twitter. I think that's really important, because if it was genuinely just a policy that you and your employees had come to some kind of understanding that maybe that some of them had asked for it in a meeting and you just wanted to institute it and say 10 of them wanted to have it on their badge and you said fine, then probably I wouldn't have any, whatever. It's a bit like people putting up family pictures in their cubicles. It's just something they want to do. But if you're announcing it as this kind of a policy that everybody has to feel pressured into doing, and that also you as a customer have to feel pressured into, nodding along and smiling and this is wonderful and great and who could have a problem with it, then what you're doing is you're saying the discussion about gender is a closed shop. And we know that outside of the world of Halifax, that this has far-reaching implications in relation to single-sex spaces and things like that, that the conversation about gender and gender ideology is not just a silly thing that fits on a badge or in a Twitter storm. It is a serious conversation about sex and biology and its worth. So, the fact that, a bank is now the hero of progressive politics, but for instituting, a badge, you just think, where has the liberal left gone, in which it has moved towards, its top contenders being Ben and Jerry's and Halifax. It's just a weird world
Mount
we live in.
Rushmore of progressive politics.
But I think that's just such an important point. I mean, if there's any doubt that, these woke politics, so to speak, have very much become the dominant ideology of the kind of ruling class, then the way in which, banks and, as you said, Ben and Jerry's and all these various different corporations have adopted this wholesale because they know that, for example, it confers very little harm to them, but a lot of status in the circles that they want to be in and the groups that they want to associate themselves with. I mean, I speak to groups that are organising around freedom of speech and women's sex-based rights and all sorts of issues that actually have majority support across the country. But many of these corporations wouldn't touch any of those issues with a barge pole. It's clear that it's because, they see these things as fashionable amongst the set that have influence and the gatekeepers of, the cultural establishment and political class and so on. And I think, it's quite striking when you see some of those tweets saying, if you don't agree with our values, then you shouldn't, be a customer or you can find another bank. I mean, that's quite weird to me to think that a bank would be actually actively pushing people away. But I do really wonder how it's really got to this point. Who is making these decisions? Such a big corporation that has customers from a wide variety of backgrounds, millions of people are handing their social media accounts, which has access to the entire public. It's now become a news story, to what seems to me to be kind of 18-year-olds that might be kind of interns, first bit out of university, which could be handling, sensitive information, confidential data with very, very little oversight. And I think, as you said, Ella, those that say, oh, why do you care? Well, actually, gender identity and the debate around that is a deeply contentious, important discussion that has real material implications across all levels of public life. And so when a corporation takes a partisan political viewpoint and actively pushes and divides people around that issue, then that is an issue to care about. And yes, there's a funny element to it, but it plays out in these tiny skirmishes, but it really reveals just how far this ideology has become embedded, where these corporations see it as totally uncontroversial, unquestionable.
And we should say it's not just about the customers either, it's about the people who work there, because obviously it's worth saying that this particular scheme is voluntary, but who wants to be the person who works at this high street bank and thinks, this is rubbish and I don't want to be involved in it? You're going to kind of ostracize yourself. There's always a kind of veiled menace behind these kind of quite be kind policies. The other thing I don't get about it, which is just a side note, is which often happens with the pronoun discussion. You very rarely use someone's pronouns when they are actually there. Like, you're not going to refer, as she was saying, surely you'd be in a situation where, relations have soured quite significantly before you start doing something like this. Very, very odd. But why is it important, do you think, Ella, that we do sort of push back against these things, even in their more ridiculous examples? Because as I was saying, as these things have got more mainstream, they pop up all the time. They're often kind of funny. It's often quite easy for the other side to caricature people as getting angry at an ice cream brand or a high street bank for something relatively innocuous. Why do you think it's important that even in its more ridiculous manifestations, we challenge this sort of new ideology?
I think it is important because if you say that you can't, something as fundamental as whether a person is a woman or a man, that you can't ascertain without using specific language, without signifying on a badge he, him, or she, her, or whatever, then what you're saying is that we're not as a society sure about each other, that we can't, we don't have the intelligence and the social backing to understand who we're interacting with. And that then plays out in the more serious instances of, for example, lots of stories recently, the big ones happened in Ireland, where things like maternity policies start to use words like pregnant people or start to use gender neutral language, where actually not being sure about who you're dealing with becomes really problematic, in the world of medicine, in the world of prisons, in the world of, outreach programs like rape crisis centres. So if we're giving up that sort of certainty, and actually it's something that happens in bad faith, because it really just is nonsense that people don't know who each other are, and actually what no one likes to admit is that if you aren't sure, most people usually have a conversation about it, and it can be quite, funny and nice. And it's not like every trans person is walking around waiting with indignation to be misgendered. It's just such a horrible way of looking at, how trans people are citizens in a world with other people. They're not that prissy. But if you're saying that we need to codify everything in language in this very restrictive, very kind of useless way, actually, kind of in a bad faith position, then what you're saying is that we're all scared of each other. We're walking around not being able to make judgments about each other, not being able to link in with each other. And I think that is a very dystopian situation to be in, because language is very important. As journalists and commentators, it's the weapon of our choice. But we know it has power, but it has the power to, as well as express things, to shut down discussions. And I think really that's what this is doing. It's saying, it's not saying, oh, you maybe call me she if you like. It's saying, if you don't call me she, then you're a bigot. And I think that's a problem.
And also, I just think we have to really ask, do we really want, the companies we work for, our bosses, to be celebrating our sexuality? I mean, privacy.
It's like none of your business.
Where is the kind of privacy point in all of this?
As soon as you walk, it's like, which one are you then? Yeah,
exactly. I remember when the kind of Black Lives Matter protests happened, and so many people were telling me about companies that were kind of asking them, you can take a day off. Yep. I'm sure you're kind of traumatized about this. This is really patronizing, really condescending, and increasing encroachment into people's private life has nothing to do with the workplace, but also is politicizing the workplace. You want to go there and kind of do your job, unless you have a kind of job that involves politics. But when you're going, likely most people that work in a bank, don't really want to be feeling pressured and getting involved in thorny kind of political conversations that can alienate them from their colleagues or create divisions that weren't previously there. This is actively politicizing an environment, creating division between people, when actually most people just want to get on with their job and not worry about these contentious issues that they really just want to escape from most of the time.